Alright chat, so I'm just gonna explain to it in terms of just the team overall damage. I'm not gonna talk about Dorothy's burst damage because that is another thing that she will provide to the team. And so here I've done a lot of testings in this. I'm not gonna bore you with some of them, but I will bore you with some of the things that I will just kind of explain right now. Let's preface this with the units that I have. We have Litter, Miranda, and now I have Dorothy at 4, which has 38.01% multiplier on parts. I have a Novel at level 4, which has a 45% multiplier or damage taken increase. And then I have a Snow White, max level. She was the main thing that I was using as a DPS comparison, and this is good for me because it is easier to see the snapshot of with all the buffs lined up and damage increase, all those lined up. I can actually see how much they are providing or how they are affecting the buffs. And then I have Maxwell at level 10, which has 42% attack, and then Privaty at level 7, 22% attack. And I was doing it versus Nihilister, and to give you context on like what my results are, let's start with the attack buffs. So the attack buffs, you guys have to realize it falls off fast. Without any buffs, without any attack buffs, my Snow White was just dealing 2.1 mil damage. However, if you try to add Privaty's 22%, it becomes 5.3. It basically like more than doubles, right? But I added it with Maxwell instead of Privaty, which is pretty much double. So from 22% it becomes 43%. Instead, I didn't have Privaty in Maxwell, and it actually becomes 7.1 mil. However, if you try to add Maxwell and Privaty, which is 66%, by the way, or 65%, it's roughly equivalent as Litter, which is 66% too, just by the way. It went to 8.8 mil. I'm gonna be basing off pretty much everything with the Maxwell and Privaty here. And so what I'm gonna talk about is this particular team comp, right? You have Dorothy, Novel, Maxwell, Privaty, and then the main DPS in this situation is Snow White. It could be whatever you have, could be Alice, but the main thing why Snow White is good to also just kind of mention is because Snow White's burst actually does, even though Novel burst lasts only for 5 seconds on her burst skill here, and Snow White's burst takes like 5 seconds to fully charge. There is a slight delay on Novel's burst. You have to wait until the light bulb explodes before it actually starts the debuff, and so that's why Snow White, even you have time to get to 1000%, and then you will still get Novel's debuff in that situation. So I have two types of damages here. One is when I'm damaging the main body, or basically if we don't have Dorothy's buff. Let's just assume the main body is basically when we don't have Dorothy's buff, or let's say we just hit the main body, because usually when you're hitting the boss, you have the main body and body part that you're hitting. Typically with Snow White or Alice or Maxwell, you want to hit the body part, but also at the same time get the pierce damage to hit the main body as well. Well, in any case, this is basically the situation. I have different instances of when I hit the main body. One is without Novel's additional multiplier, which is basically kind of like the base damage, and so the base damage is like 8.8 mil, and then we have with crit 12 mil, and then I didn't crit, but it has Novel's damage increase is about 12.8 mil. Compare and contrast, what if I hit the main body versus a body part? Basically throughout all of that, it's consistent that with Dorothy 4, it's just a complete straight 38% additional damage. So it's just a straight up 1.38 multiplier. Now these are the same kind of counts, but I kind of reorganized them, and this time around I'm comparing them with, instead of the main body part main body and the body part. Now I'm comparing them is if without novel versus with novel, and it is pretty much almost consistent. Everything else was around 44.53%, which is close to the 45% multiplier that novel had. And so basically with novel and Dorothy, the way I do it is like 1.45 times 1.38. It's roughly times 2 multiplier, and mind you, this is just level 4 for both novel and Dorothy. So I would say that if I did have a max of novel and Dorothy, it would end up having to be, instead of a 2.0 multiplier from level 4, and I pushed both of them to level 10, it would be a 2.5 multiplier for all of them. And so I would say even so, even at low budget, you're already getting a 2.0 multiplier. That's a really huge amount. And with 65% attack, this is Maxwell's and Privaty's. My base damage was 8.8. I did the calculation. Okay, what if I did the just multiplier? It's like about 17.7 mil, and my actual results 17.724, which is this one. It was hitting the body part with novel, and margin of error about 0.03%, which basically means that I was like roughly correct. And what I'm getting at here is like, I'm just gonna put it in here. If I actually do it, I would get 8.8. This is my base damage, and then I just replace it with my max, and I would instead deal 22.46426. And so let's go with Miranda, Maxwell, and Privaty. If I'm just gonna do theoretical math here. Obviously, you know already that as you get more attack percent, you get diminishing returns. So it's like 60% plus 40%, it's 100%, but then maybe plus 1 mil, so it would be roughly about maybe 10.8 mil probably with Miranda, Maxwell, and Privaty. I would say that's a safe assumption, right? Like I'm not gonna get more than that. So if I do that, I'm replacing Dorothy, and if we go in here, so that 10.8 mil, since I replaced Dorothy, which is the 1.05, all I have left was just the 1.65. If I do this multiplier here, I'm just showing you like the actual calculation. This is with my max Miranda, Maxwell, novel, and S7 Privaty. So this is already like an hypermax in like super concentrated for my Snow White, you know, getting buffed by Miranda, and Dorothy was still coming out on top. Now, like I would say, if I you know, if we add litter instead, let's assume that somehow my litter can do a max charge on Snow White, then that's another 20%. I'll give it a high estimate still. Sure, I'll go with 11.8. Mind you, this is a pretty much difficult situation also, because like litter, I only have 5 seconds. That's gonna be very difficult to have your Snow White time with litter unless you have like a lot of charge speed. So that's another whole different problem that you're gonna be facing on. So now let's add novel, which is this, multiply 11.8 mil times 1.675. It's still 19.765. Not to mention, you're only with litter, you only have those buffs for 5 seconds. With Dorothy using Privaty, you could have potentially 100% uptime on the buffs, if not like an extremely high uptime on your buffs with Dorothy and Privaty combination. So what I'm saying is this is how much Dorothy is, and like this is with litter. Well, there you go. I just did the math for you to actually just calculate how much better Dorothy is with litter, in terms of if we're just specifically talking like, okay, the boss has multiple just the parts. Oh, and by the way, I haven't included the skill 2 and burst just yet. Okay, so that's why Dorothy is out damaging litter under the right conditions, obviously, and you're gonna include her own damage as well, which is even more. So this is just the math to show you that Dorothy is stronger than litter. Let's assume that the boss has a body part that's constantly there the whole time, the entire fight. Again, the easiest example was Nihilister during Union Raid. You basically couldn't, at the highest level, you basically couldn't really destroy all the parts on it, so you're always dealing additional damage, parts damage. Also, another thing I guess that I didn't calculate is like litter has another 14%, because I forgot to calculate in that earlier calculation the additional 14.42%, and I think she has additional crit damage and max ammo buff. But then, you know, that it only lasts for 5 seconds, to be fair. Meanwhile, you have Dorothy. She has like pretty much an almost unlimited uptime. If not, chat, I don't know how you guys were testing Dorothy's, but I'm pretty sure with Privaty you pretty much have almost a near 100% uptime on Dorothy's buff also, which with the parts break. But even then, so let's say it was 13 mil times 1.675, 21.775, so it's still less. And also, you know, again, the boss has to have body parts. But if maybe I didn't, I'm not sure if I actually said it earlier in the video, but if the boss doesn't have body parts, well, then litter obviously will start gapping Dorothy, because Dorothy doesn't provide any additional buffs. She basically, like, the main body, that's your damage, not the enhanced with body parts that for Dorothy, because you're not really, yeah, you don't get any bonus damage. So yeah, that's another thing to keep in mind. So like litter still has her use, right? But this time around, at the very least, there's someone that can match her under the right circumstances, regardless, right? Yeah, body versus body parts for V1s. Yeah, so yeah, I just wanted to add that in before I totally forget, and I also wanted to emphasize that this is not saying that Dorothy is always better than litter. There's gonna be, under the right conditions, they're gonna be one is gonna be better than the other. So just to kind of finalize this team composition, basically, well, Dorothy is a separate multiplier, Novel is a separate multiplier, your Maxwell and Privaty are your attack buffers. Dorothy and Privaty synergize a lot with each other because Dorothy will have better uptime with her buff skill with Privaty on there, and also Maxwell is a very strong when highly upgraded, when you max out her skills, especially her burst, so she is also a good candidate for that. And then for your burst, for your main attacker, then you know, it's whichever one you actually find best, be Alice, could be Snow White, or what have you. But basically these units have a lot of synergy with one another because different multiplier, and these are your attack buffers, and then you have your main DPS. But hey, you know, if you guys want to check out more of these kind of things and you want to figure out really how good is your new character, well, just come back into my stream, twitch.tv/KaiGLV. That's gonna be it for me. I'll see you guys next time.